Good evening from New York. After an all-too-brief pause in their ceaseless efforts to turn a 23-year-old loser's failed attempt to detonate his underwear into something just this side of the burning of the White House in 1812, Republicans have now resumed warning that the end is nigh, and the U.S. government has ordered new security measures at airports around the globe, and both efforts have hit slight snags. We'll get to Republican insecurity first. Airport security. Associated Press reporting tonight that numerous countries are not yet observing new airport security measures ordered by the U.S., specifically passport holders from 14 countries such as Yemen, Nigeria, Pakistan, and passengers flying through those countries to the U.S. are now supposed to get a pat-down and a search of their carry-on bags. The AP reporting, though, no changes at airports in Syria, Algeria, Libya, and Lebanon. Britain, France, Germany, and Switzerland all said they are still assessing the new guidelines. The Homeland Security Secretary, Janet Napolitano, was asked today by NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams about that lack of compliance.
We are working now to make sure that it is 100% complied with, but I will tell you, our own people who work internationally in the airports and with the carriers are very confident that these are the rules that are being applied.
Returning from the vacation today, the president met with security officials, including his top counterterrorism advisor, Sunday talk show star John Brennan. The president calling a meeting tomorrow afternoon in the Situation Room with the CIA, Departments of State, Justice, Homeland Security, and more to review what is known so far. The president will deliver brief remarks to the public via the media at about 4 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Lacking such requisite information, some Republicans remain bent on undermining Mr. Obama by stoking fear. Senator Jim DeMint criticizing the president for not saying the word terror enough. This from a senator whose own fear of American workers organizing into one of these scary union things is the reason that the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, does not have a leader. DeMint still defending his one-man delay of the confirmation of former FBI agent Errol Southers as head of the TSA, arguing that letting TSA workers organize would endanger the nation. It was, however, former Vice President Cheney's contention that Mr. Obama is pretending we are not at war that continued to draw rebuke, including even from veterans of the Bush-Cheney administration. Mr. Brennan, who served in the Bush administration too, leading the creation of the National Counterterrorism Center, responded to Mr. Cheney's remarks.
I'm very disappointed in the Vice President's comments. I'm neither a Republican nor a Democrat. I've worked for the past 5 administrations, and either the Vice President is willfully mischaracterizing this President's position, both in terms of the language he uses and the actions he's taken, or he's ignorant of the facts. And in either case, it doesn't speak well of what the Vice President is doing.
In a New York Times piece detailing several ways in which Mr. Obama has been tougher on al-Qaeda than Bush and Cheney were, Mr. Brennan goes further regarding Cheney, quoting, "What they're doing is just playing into al-Qaeda's strategic effort, which is to get us to battle among ourselves instead of focusing on them." While the Times reports some half-dozen Bush-Cheney veterans are too afraid or too political to admit their support of Obama's counter-terror efforts, Mr. Bush's final CIA director, Michael Hayden, told the Times there is a continuum from the second Bush term to today. Yesterday, he went further, putting blame on himself and his administration.
True to be said that we did release some folks from Guantanamo, despite our best efforts, making this threat assessment that actually returned to the battlefield to return to terrorism. And certainly we bear responsibility for that.
Let's turn first to MSNBC political analyst Richard Wolff, also author of Renegade, The Making of a President. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
What is the focus here right now? Is it the pushback borders at other airports? Is it the indication that intelligence, such as what the NSA knew about al-Qaeda in Yemen, using a Nigerian man for an attack, was not, maybe is not being utilized? Where is the focus right now?
Well, I was speaking to White House folks earlier today, and it's clear the president is still deeply concerned and troubled, even angry at the intelligence lapses. But they see this more as an intelligence lapse more than a situation of airport security faults. So the question here is, why didn't the centralized system of intelligence that was set up after 9/11, why didn't it work? Is this conspiracy or cock-up? Is it a case of the agencies having so much rivalry between them that they were more determined to to stymie each other or this centralized system rather than dealing with the terrorist threat? Or was it just there were so many dots, no one could connect them because it was just all too random to figure out? Seems that the president is leaning very much towards thinking this was a systemic failure by individuals who maybe had an alternative agenda.
If airport security is the fail-safe, though, in that equation, what was behind the Bush administration's failure to establish the secondary checks overseas? Why are we suddenly rushing to this idea now? When did Mr. Bush and I presume Mr. Chertoff drop that ball?
Well, there are more smart, more efficient ways to protect the country than to defend every airport, because we know from our own airport system here in this country that there are no fail-safe methods. Even with all the extra methods that you have out there, people take off their shoes because of the shoe bomber, and then terrorists try and put the same explosives on another part of their body or another part of their clothing. The question here is, why wasn't the intelligence directed at countries where al-Qaeda was reconstituting or establishing itself anew? That gets you to a strategic question, which unfortunately the last administration failed to see because it was diverted most classically into Iraq.
To your second point there, and we can, sort of skip the Woody Allen joke about underwear will now be worn on the outside at the airport so we can check. Your second point that you suggested in there, that the administration is looking into perhaps mixed motives, mixed or misplaced priorities. I'm not sure exactly how you phrase that. In terms of what? Getting messages from A to B? Are people thought to have been deliberately withholding information so that the dots could not be connected?
Right. The question is, was this information that was shared? Remember, there was some sharing of information, but it involves the father of this, in the end, a terrorist who walks into see the CIA officials in a foreign embassy. This is an American embassy in a foreign country. And, that information, was it shared fully? Why wasn't it shared fully? The question there is, again, cock-up or conspiracy. Was there a reason that these agencies were at war with each other that prevented that intelligence from being shared?
Is the implication there that there is at least a possibility that somebody understood how serious this could be and yet withheld information to make some other part of the counterterrorism system look bad?
That has got to be an area that the White House is looking into, and motives can be hard to assess because it's not clear that this person was easily identified as a terrorist. Even with the father coming forward saying they had concerns, was that more of a family concern, or were there enough fingerprints here about the radicalization of this individual to suggest that it should have been taken to a different level, at the very least a security level beyond more than a nominal sharing of information? That's where this inquiry, this internal inquiry for the moment has to go.
Well, certainly not to get too far ahead of what the information the White House doesn't have, and presumably you don't have, and certainly I don't have. But that seems to me that what you're describing, at least in theory, is a far greater threat than a guy with explosives on an airplane, whether or not he succeeds in blowing them up.
Well, it's the most important line of defense. I don't know that it's a threat in itself, but you can defend every airport as much as you like. In the end, the most efficient, safest border line for security has got to be human intelligence. There seems to have been plenty of human intelligence in this case.
MSNBC political analyst Richard Wolff, the author of Renegade, The Making of the President. Great thanks, as always, for your time, and especially for that last point, Richard.
Thank you, Keith.